The fourth season of disappointing yields had turned Oakridge Farm into a banker's worst nightmare, rather than the productive acreage it once was. The fertile bottomland that Jack Miller's great-grandfather had purchased in 1890 stood mostly fallow, its potential locked beneath stubborn rocks and hard pan that years of conventional farming had failed to improve. Jack stood at the edge of his last productive field, boots sinking into soil that barely supported the crops he'd planted with such hope in spring. At 48, his weathered face had settled into permanent lines of worry. His powerful shoulders, built through decades of physical labor, now stooped with the weight of impending failure. "It's not looking good, Rusty," he said to the aging German shepherd at his heels. The dog whined softly, pressing against his leg as they walked toward the rocky northern slope that had resisted cultivation since his grandfather's time. The Miller family had survived the Dust Bowl, weathered the farm crisis of the 1980s, and adapted to changing markets for generations. But 3 consecutive drought years, a devastating hailstorm last season, and steadily rising equipment costs had pushed Oakridge Farm to the brink of collapse. Jack climbed onto his aging John Deere tractor, its once bright green paint now faded and chipped. The land clearing attachment he'd rented last week, an expense he could barely afford, waited to be used in a final attempt to make the rocky northern section farmable. 40 acres of new ground, he muttered as he fired up the diesel engine. That's what we need to stay afloat. The bank's latest notice had arrived yesterday, giving him 90 days to make a substantial payment or face foreclosure. The letter had ended with a handwritten note mentioning that Greenfield Agricultural Developments had expressed significant interest in acquiring the property, a thinly veiled suggestion that Jack should consider selling. Before we jump back, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rocky northern slope had frustrated 3 generations of Millers. His grandfather had claimed there was something unnatural about how the rocks were distributed, too orderly for nature's work, he'd insisted. Jack's father had simply declared it a waste of time and focused on the productive southern fields instead. But now, with productivity falling in the reliable sections and margins razor thin, Jack had no choice but to attempt what his ancestors had abandoned. Every additional acre could mean the difference between keeping or losing the farm. The sound of tires on gravel announced a visitor. A sleek black SUV bearing Greenfield Agricultural Developments logo pulled up alongside the barn. Sarah Wilson, Greenfield's chief acquisitions officer for nearly a decade, stepped out. She knew every farmer in 3 counties by name and could recite their property values from memory. Her grandfather had been a tenant farmer who had lost everything in the Dust Bowl, giving her what she claimed was a special appreciation for the challenges facing independent farms. Today, her normally friendly expression was replaced with professional detachment as she approached. "Jack," she greeted him with a nod. "I wish this was just a social call." "Another offer?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. She handed him an envelope. 15% above our last proposal. That's all the increase I could get approved. Corporates eager to consolidate holdings in this valley before the new highway goes in. He took the envelope without opening it. "Thanks for trying, Sarah." She glanced at the rocky slope. "Have you considered Dr. Thompson's theory about your property?" Jack's jaw tightened. Dr. Robert Thompson, president of the Clearwater County Historical Society and Greenfield's consultant, had been making increasingly insistent requests to survey Oakridge Farm. His latest communication had suggested anomalies, consistent with Civil War-era activity in the rocky northern section, a claim Jack found conveniently aligned with Greenfield's interests. "I'm not giving Thompson access to my property," he said flatly, "not while I still have options." Sarah's expression softened slightly. Jack, I understand the farm's been in your family for generations, but at some point you have to face reality. That section has never been productive, and Thompson's preliminary scans suggest... I'll make it productive today, he interrupted. That's why I rented the land clearer, she sighed. Just don't wait too long to consider alternatives. Our offer won't stay on the table indefinitely. After Sarah left, Jack stood motionless beside his tractor. The corporate offer crumpled. In his fist, Rusty pressed against his leg, offering silent comfort. That evening, after reviewing the farm's finances and finding no path to solvency, Jack climbed to the attic. Dust motes danced in the beam of his flashlight as he made his way to an old military footlocker tucked beneath the eaves. The locker had belonged to his great-grandfather, William Miller, who had claimed this land after returning from service in the Civil War. Family legend held that William had used surveying techniques unusual for farmers of that era to select this particular property, passing up seemingly better land. Jack lifted the heavy lid, revealing leather-bound journals, surveying tools, and curious artifacts carefully labeled in faded handwriting. He hadn't examined these materials since inheriting the farm, viewing them more as heirlooms than resources. The earliest journal, dated 1866, detailed William's methodical search. May 10th, 1866. I am convinced a significant structure exists in the northern section of this unclaimed parcel. The old stories speak of a passage to freedom in this valley that was sealed during the final days of the war. Most dismiss such tales, but my experience with the Underground Railroad during the conflict has taught me to respect such knowledge. Jack flipped forward. June 23rd, 1866, acquired the full 160 acres today. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Agent thought me peculiar for selecting this particular section, as the northern portion appears unsuited for cultivation. If he knew my true interest lay not in the surface, but in what may lie beneath, he would think me madder still. His great-grandfather had apparently selected the property specifically because of something beneath the rocky section. He continued reading. July 3rd, 1866. Initial survey confirms my suspicions. The rock formation follows too precise a pattern to be natural. My measurements indicate a chambered space, approximately 12 ft below surface level. The legends of the Liberty Line may have basis, in fact. July 12, 1866. Professor Whitaker visited today, expressing unusual interest in purchasing the northern section. Offered twice the going rate per acre. When I declined, his manner turned cold. Mentioned that his historical society had prior claim to any Civil War findings in the county, and that I would be wise to accept his generosity. Jack sat back, his mind racing. A chambered space beneath. The rocky section. His great-grandfather had apparently detected some kind of underground structure, but had kept the discovery private. And a professor had shown interest in the property even then. Could this explain Dr. Thompson's persistent interest, a continuation of his predecessor's attention from more than a century ago? The possibility gave Jack renewed purpose. If he could find evidence of whatever William had detected, he might secure financial assistance through historical preservation programs or negotiate with Greenfield from a position of strength rather than desperation. The next morning, Jack prepared to clear the rocky section. He studied his great-grandfather's journals one more time, noting areas where William had mapped the strongest anomalies, then marked those sections on a current survey map. As the sun climbed higher, Jack started the tractor and headed toward the rocky slope. The land-clearing attachment would allow him to penetrate deeper than conventional plowing. He didn't notice the drone that briefly hovered over his property, its camera zooming in on his activities, or the urgent phone call being made to Greenfield Agricultural Development's executive offices. For 2 grueling days, Jack worked from dawn until dusk, the powerful land-clearing attachment slowly transforming the rocky northern slope. The work was punishing even with mechanized help. The unusual concentration of stones required constant adjustment and manual intervention. Each evening he would collapse into his grandfather's old armchair, muscles aching, hands blistered despite his work gloves, and read more from William's journals for guidance. On the 3rd day, as Jack guided the tractor across a particularly stubborn section that William had marked with special attention in his survey notes, something changed. The land-clearing blade, which had been meeting consistent resistance, suddenly dropped several inches, as if the ground beneath had given way. "What the hell?" Jack muttered, immediately shutting down the engine. The vibration through the tractor had been different from hitting an ordinary rock or root system. It had felt hollow, almost like breaking through a thin shell. He climbed down and approached the area where the blade had penetrated. A dark opening yawned beneath the disrupted soil, roughly 3 feet across, too regular to be a natural formation. Jack knelt and shined his flashlight into the darkness. The beam revealed what appeared to be worked stone below, not the natural bedrock he'd expected. Jack's heart raced as he widened the opening enough to peer through properly. What he saw made him sit back on his heels in astonishment. Below was a chamber, roughly 15 feet square, its walls constructed of fitted stone blocks. Iron brackets that once held torches lined the walls, and what appeared to be a stone table or altar stood in the center. This was no root cellar or simple storage space. The craftsmanship and layout suggested something far more deliberate, something that aligned perfectly with his great-grandfather's journal entries about a chambered space. Jack knew he should proceed carefully. If this was indeed a historical site, disturbing it improperly could destroy valuable evidence. But his curiosity and the potential implications for saving his farm drove him to investigate further. He returned to the farmhouse and gathered supplies: a sturdy rope, his most powerful flashlight, work gloves, and a camera to document whatever he found. Rusty followed anxiously as Jack returned to the opening, the dog's behavior unusually agitated. "Stay here, boy," Jack commanded, securing one end of the rope to his tractor and the other around his waist. With a final check of his equipment, he carefully lowered himself into the chamber. The air below was surprisingly dry and cold, preserved by the sealed environment for what must have been decades, perhaps centuries. Jack's boots landed on a stone floor worn smooth by long-forgotten footsteps. The beam of his flashlight danced across walls covered with faded markings. Some appeared to be maps, others symbolic representations he couldn't immediately interpret. The central stone table wasn't an altar as he'd first thought, but rather a large map carved into stone, showing the region's rivers and topography with remarkable accuracy. Small symbols were etched at specific points across the map, connecting in lines that didn't follow any natural features he recognized. "The Liberty Line," Jack whispered, recalling his great-grandfather's journal. "The Underground Railroad. Pathways to freedom for escaping slaves before and during the Civil War. This chamber must have been a way station, carefully hidden and eventually sealed." As he photographed the central map, Jack noticed that his phone's compass app was behaving erratically, the needle spinning continuously as if unable to establish true north. Other unexplainable phenomena became apparent as he continued his documentation. His phone's battery, which had been at 80% when he descended, was now rapidly depleting despite minimal use, and he experienced an odd sensation of pressure in his ears that changed as he moved around the chamber. After nearly an hour of careful documentation, Jack decided to retrieve a single small artifact as tangible proof of his discovery. He justified this minimal disturbance as necessary given the circumstances, carefully wrapping a palm-sized iron token featuring concentric symbols in his handkerchief and securing it in his pocket. Just as he prepared to ascend, Jack's headlamp illuminated something he had initially overlooked: a narrow passage leading from the main chamber deeper into the earth. The passage was partially obscured by shadow but appeared to extend significantly. Beyond the limits of his light, the temptation to explore further was powerful, but Jack's practical nature asserted itself. He had already spent over an hour underground. His phone battery was nearly depleted, and the day was wearing on. Further, exploration could wait until he had processed his initial discovery and determined the best path forward. As Jack emerged from the chamber into the fading evening light, he found Rusty still waiting anxiously, along with an unexpected visitor. Dr. Emily Carter, a young archaeologist from the State University whose public lectures on regional civil war history Jack had occasionally attended, stood beside his tractor, examining the scattered stones from the collapsed entrance. "Mr. Miller," she greeted him with evident surprise as he climbed out of the hole. "I was passing by and saw your dog apparently in distress. I stopped to make sure everything was all right." Her eyes moved from Jack to the opening and back. "May I ask what you've discovered?" Jack hesitated, uncertain whether to trust an academic with his find, given his great-grandfather's experiences with Professor Whitaker. But Dr. Carter had a reputation for advocating for preservation of historical sites and had publicly criticized institutions that hoarded significant discoveries, including the Historical Society, now headed by Dr. Thompson. "Something that shouldn't be here," he answered finally. "Something that challenges everything we thought we knew about this region's history." Dr. Carter's expression shifted from polite concern to intense professional interest. "May I see?" "Not today," Jack replied, making a quick decision. "It's getting dark, and the entrance isn't properly secured, but I could use someone with expertise to help document this properly." He paused, studying her reaction. "Someone who won't immediately report this to Greenfield or the Historical Society." Her eyebrows rose at this condition. "You have concerns about those organizations?" "Let's just say there's a history between my family and certain academic interests regarding this property," Jack said carefully. "A history documented in my great-grandfather's journals that makes me cautious about who I trust with this discovery." Dr. Carter considered this for a moment, then nodded. "I understand institutional politics better than most, Mr. Miller. I can respect your caution." She handed him her card. "If you decide you want independent archaeological expertise, call me directly on my cell. No university involvement unless you explicitly request it." After she departed, Jack carefully covered the entrance with a tarp weighted down by rocks, making it appear like ordinary farming equipment storage to casual observation. Only then did he allow himself to truly process what he had discovered. A historical site of potentially unprecedented significance that could completely rewrite the region's Civil War narrative. That evening, as he examined the iron token under better lighting at his kitchen table, the true implications began to sink in. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, featuring symbols arranged in patterns suggesting not just directions for the Underground Railroad, but something more complex. The iron itself was unlike any local material, with unusual markings etched into its surface that hinted at a purpose beyond mere identification. Jack's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Wilson. "Dr. Thompson noticed you're finally clearing the northern section. He's very interested in visiting tomorrow to discuss." The timing couldn't be coincidental. Someone, probably the drone he had noticed earlier, had reported his discovery to Greenfield, and now they were moving quickly to gain access. But what had been a simple corporate land grab had suddenly transformed into something far more complex. Jack wasn't just fighting to save his farm anymore. He had become the custodian of a discovery that could reshape understanding of the entire region's past. As he contemplated his next steps, Jack recalled a passage from his great-grandfather's final journal entry regarding the northern section. December 12, 1905. I have kept the secret of what lies beneath the stones for nearly 40 years, not from greed, but from deep conviction that some discoveries belong not to individuals or institutions, but to humanity itself. When the proper time comes, when the right guardian appears with both the wisdom to understand and the strength to protect, the passage will reveal its purpose. Until then, I leave this knowledge to my descendants, trusting they will recognize the moment when preservation and revelation must finally align. Jack realized that moment had arrived, forced by circumstance and a desperate attempt to save his family legacy. The discovery beneath his land offered both tremendous opportunity and tremendous responsibility. The chance to preserve his farm while potentially transforming historical understanding, but also the burden of ensuring the discovery wasn't exploited or suppressed by powerful interests. After careful consideration, Jack picked up his phone and dialed Dr. Carter's number. Whatever lay ahead, he needed an ally with both expertise and integrity, someone who could help him navigate the complex intersection of archaeology, property rights, and corporate interests that his tractor blade had accidentally uncovered. Dr. Emily Carter arrived at Oakridge Farm shortly after dawn the following morning, her modest sedan packed with archaeological equipment and documentation tools. Jack was struck by how different she was from the academic stereotype he had expected. Emily was practical and direct, dressed for field work in worn hiking boots and durable canvas pants. Her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, she carried herself with the confident efficiency of someone accustomed to working in challenging conditions rather than the cautious formality of a traditional academic. I brought ground-penetrating radar, she explained as they unloaded equipment from her car, and a portable XRF analyzer for preliminary material analysis. We should be able to get a much clearer picture of what we're dealing with before anyone else gets involved. I appreciate your discretion, Jack said, helping her with a particularly heavy case, especially given how quickly Greenfield is moving to gain access. Emily nodded, her expression serious. Archaeological ethics aren't just abstract principles for me, Mr. Miller. Historical preservation has been systematically compromised for corporate interests for decades. Significant discoveries are often whisked away to distant institutions or, worse, private collections. I've dedicated my career to changing that pattern. Just Jack, please, he replied, finding himself immediately trusting her straightforward manner. And I think our interests align perfectly. I want to protect both my farm and whatever historical significance this discovery holds. They made their way to the covered entrance, Rusty following at a comfortable distance, his initial distress seemingly diminished by Emily's presence. Jack removed the tarp, revealing the opening he had partially shored up the previous evening with lumber from his barn. Emily approached the edge and knelt to examine the stonework visible around the entrance. "This construction technique," she murmured, brushing away soil to reveal more of the fitted blocks. "It's reminiscent of early 19th century masonry, but the precision is extraordinary and completely undocumented in this region." Before descending, they set up the ground-penetrating radar at several points around the entrance, creating a preliminary map of what lay beneath. The results displayed on Emily's tablet caused her to inhale sharply. "Jack, this isn't just a single chamber," she said, angling the screen so he could see. "There's an entire complex down there, multiple connected chambers extending at least 100 yards in that direction." She pointed toward the northern boundary of his property. "This is far more extensive than anything previously discovered in this part of the country." With proper safety equipment, helmets with mounted lights, harnesses, and a more secure rope system, they made their way into the main chamber Jack had explored the previous day. Emily moved with reverent care, documenting everything systematically before touching or approaching any artifacts. "These markings," she said, examining the wall with her light, "they're not just maps for the Underground Railroad as we might expect. The symbolism suggests something far more complex, a comprehensive system of communication that combines elements from multiple traditions. And look at this craftsmanship." She ran her fingers gently over the stone map at the center of the room. "These weren't carved with the tools we'd expect from that era. The precision suggests specialized equipment." She moved to examine various symbols etched into the walls, her expression growing increasingly astonished. "This is impossible," she whispered, her professional detachment momentarily cracking. "These show astronomical calculations of remarkable precision. Look at this section. It appears to track celestial movements across extremely long time periods, including what might be solstice predictions." Jack watched as Emily worked, her expertise revealing layers of significance he had completely missed in his initial exploration. What had appeared to him as simply old markings were, through her trained eyes, revealing evidence of mathematical understanding, astronomical knowledge, and cultural practices entirely unknown to historical records. "How old do you think this is?" he asked, as she carefully photographed a series of symbols arranged in what appeared to be a deliberate pattern. "Without carbon dating or other laboratory analysis, I can't be certain," she replied. "But based on construction techniques and material wear patterns, we're looking at mid-19th century for the chamber itself. However," she glanced up at him, "Jack, I need to be absolutely clear about something. This discovery could fundamentally change our understanding of the Underground Railroad and secret societies of the Civil War era. The level of sophistication evident here simply doesn't match the established historical record for this region." The implications began to sink in. Jack had discovered not just some interesting historical site, but potentially evidence that would require rewriting textbooks and reconsidering fundamental assumptions about American history during one of its most crucial periods. Emily carefully lifted the iron token Jack had removed, examining its edges. "There's something else extraordinary here. This isn't just an identification token as used in the known Underground Railroad network. These symbols correspond directly to astronomical alignments and the material composition." She used her portable analyzer on the surface. "This contains alloy combinations that weren't commonly available in the 1860s. The technology to create this would have been extremely rare and sophisticated." After several hours of meticulous documentation, they turned their attention to the passageway Jack had noticed during his first exploration. With proper lighting, they could see that it extended significantly beyond the main chamber, sloping gently downward. "Should we explore further?" Jack asked, checking the time. He was acutely aware that Dr. Thompson had requested to visit the property today, and Greenfield would likely become increasingly aggressive in their attempts to gain access. Emily considered carefully. "We should at least determine where it leads and whether there are additional chambers. That information could be crucial for establishing the full scope of protection needed." They proceeded cautiously down the passage, which maintained the same precise stonework as the main chamber. After approximately 50 yards, it opened into a second, smaller chamber that caused even Emily to stop in amazement. Unlike the first chamber with its maps and symbols, this room appeared to be dedicated entirely to astronomical observation. A complex arrangement of channels cut into the floor, aligned with small apertures in the ceiling. Apertures that Jack realized must extend all the way to the surface, cleverly disguised within the rocky landscape that had frustrated farmers for generations. "It's an observatory," Emily breathed, moving carefully around the perimeter. These channels would have been filled with water to create reflecting surfaces. The apertures would allow observation of specific celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, perhaps even particular star alignments, the mathematics required to design this. She shook her head in wonder. Jack, this is unprecedented. An underground observatory of this sophistication fundamentally challenges our understanding of 19th century scientific knowledge. As they continued exploring, Emily's scientific excitement was tempered by growing concern. "We need to secure legal protection for this site immediately," she said, as they made their way back toward the main chamber. "The archaeological community has protocols for discoveries of this magnitude, but those protocols assume institutional oversight. With private property and corporate interests involved, we're in complicated territory." Jack nodded, sharing her concern. "And based on my great-grandfather's journals, there's a century-long history of attempts to acquire this property specifically because someone suspected what lay beneath. That makes me question whether normal protection channels would work, or whether they'd be manipulated." Back on the surface, they found Rusty barking alertly at an approaching vehicle, the now familiar black SUV belonging to Sarah Wilson. Jack checked his watch. It was barely noon, hours before the appointment she had requested for Dr. Thompson's visit. "They're moving faster than expected," Emily murmured, quickly packing her most revealing equipment into her car. "How do you want to handle this?" Jack made a split-second decision. "Follow my lead. We'll acknowledge finding something, but minimize its significance for now. We need time to establish proper protection before they understand the full scope." Sarah wasn't alone. Dr. Robert Thompson sat in the passenger seat, his tall, thin frame and silver hair visible through the windshield. Even from a distance, Jack could see the man's intense focus on the tarp-covered entrance to the chamber. "Mr. Miller," Sarah called as she stepped from the vehicle. "I apologize for arriving early, but Dr. Thompson's schedule opened up unexpectedly." Her eyes moved to Emily, registering immediate recognition and barely concealed dismay. "Dr. Carter, what a surprise to find you here." "Just helping a friend with some unusual findings," Emily replied casually, though Jack noted the immediate tension between the two women. Dr. Thompson approached, extending his hand to Jack while barely acknowledging Emily's presence. "Mr. Miller, I've been interested in your property's geological and historical features for quite some time. I understand you've made some sort of discovery during your land clearing efforts." His calculated understatement was transparent to Jack, who had now read enough of his great-grandfather's journals to understand the likely connection between Thompson and the Professor Whitaker, who had pressured William a century earlier. "I hit something unexpected with the tractor," Jack confirmed, matching Thompson's casual tone. "Appears to be some kind of old root cellar or storage space. Dr. Carter happened to be passing by and offered to take a look, given her expertise in historical structures." Thompson's eyes narrowed slightly at this deliberate downplaying. "A root cellar? How fascinating. Mind if I have a look?" "Nah, actually, we've barely begun assessing structural stability," Emily interjected smoothly. "As a matter of professional safety protocols, I wouldn't recommend anyone else entering until proper shoring is installed. Old structures like this can be quite hazardous." Sarah stepped forward, her business demeanor firmly in place. "Jack, Greenfield is prepared to offer substantial financial support for proper archaeological assessment, along with a significant revision to our purchase offer given this new development. Dr. Thompson's expertise would be invaluable in determining the historical significance and monetary value of whatever you've discovered." The carefully choreographed pressure was exactly what Jack had expected. What he hadn't anticipated was the cold certainty in Thompson's eyes, the look of someone who knew precisely what lay beneath the tarp and had been waiting decades to access it. "I appreciate the offer," Jack replied carefully, "but I'll need some time to consider my options. This is still active farmland, and I have ongoing operations to manage." Perhaps we could reschedule once I've had a chance to secure the site properly. Thompson's professional smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course, though I should mention that discoveries of potential historical significance on private property fall under specific regulatory frameworks. As president of the County Historical Society, I have certain statutory obligations to ensure proper assessment and preservation. The veiled threat was clear. If Jack didn't cooperate voluntarily, Thompson was prepared to involve regulatory authorities. What remained unclear was whether those authorities would protect the discovery or simply provide Thompson with the access he sought. After Victoria and Dr. Thompson reluctantly departed with promises to follow up soon. Jack and Emily quickly covered the entrance with additional camouflage, making it appear like nothing more than a section of rocky ground with some farming equipment stored nearby. "Thompson knows," Emily said quietly once the SUV was out of sight. "He knows exactly what's down there, or at least has a very good idea. The question is how." Jack thought about his great-grandfather's journals. "I think there's been institutional knowledge about this site for generations, passed down through whatever academic society Professor Whitaker represented in the 1890s. Thompson isn't just discovering this now. He's been waiting for an opportunity to access it, which means we need to move quickly. I have contacts at the Historical Preservation Alliance who could help establish legal protection independent of the County Historical Society," Emily concluded. "With your permission, I'd like to bring in a trusted colleague who specializes in cultural property law." Jack agreed, recognizing that the situation had escalated beyond what either of them could handle alone. As Emily made calls from her car, he returned to the farmhouse to retrieve more of William's journals, hoping to find additional information about the mysterious society that had pressured his great-grandfather. What he found in the later journals was more disturbing than he had anticipated. Detailed accounts of systematic efforts to acquire the property through increasingly aggressive means, from financial pressure to threats of eminent domain proceedings, all orchestrated by an organization William referred to as the Antiquarian Society. November 18th, 1895, one entry read. "Whitaker's successor visited today, a man named Caldwell, with the same cold eyes and false courtesy. Offered triple market value for the northern section alone. When refused, suggested certain tax reassessments might be forthcoming, as he had colleagues in the county assessor's office. The society grows bolder in their methods while remaining invisible to public scrutiny." By the time Emily returned from making her calls, Jack had pieced together a troubling historical pattern. A shadowy academic organization with powerful connections had pursued knowledge of the underground complex for generations, operating through various front entities and affiliated individuals. Based on William's descriptions, the modern greenfield agricultural developments bore striking similarities to companies that had attempted to acquire the property in the 1920s and 1950s. "My colleague can be here tomorrow morning," Emily announced. "She believes we can file for emergency protection under both archaeological preservation statutes and historical registry laws, but we'll need to move quickly and gather as much documentation as possible before Thompson can mobilize institutional opposition." As the sun began to set over Oakridge Farm, Jack felt the weight of unexpected responsibility settling on his shoulders. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save his family's land had evolved into a mission to protect a discovery that could reshape understanding of an entire historical period, and to prevent that discovery from being controlled by the same shadowy interests that had pursued it for over a century. He looked at Emily, who was reviewing the day's documentation with intense concentration, and felt profound gratitude for the ally circumstance had provided. Whatever lay ahead, he wasn't facing it alone. "My great-grandfather kept this secret for decades," he said quietly. Protecting it was his life's work, though he never fully understood what he was protecting. Now I know why. Emily looked up from her tablet, her expression serious but determined. And now we have a chance to ensure it's properly preserved and studied, not hidden away in some private collection or institutional vault. This discovery belongs to humanity, especially to the descendants of those whose freedom may have depended on it. As night fell over the farm, they continued planning their next steps, knowing that powerful forces were already mobilizing against them. The race to protect one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in American history had begun. A race against both corporate interests and an organization that had patiently waited generations for this moment. By dawn, Jack and Emily had transformed the farmhouse kitchen into an impromptu command center. Maps of the property were spread across the table, William's journals were stacked chronologically for reference, and Emily's laptop displayed a growing database of their photographic documentation from the chambers below. Archaeological protection laws are complicated when it comes to private property, explained Maria Gonzalez, the cultural heritage attorney Emily had called in. She was a compact, energetic woman in her 40s, with an impressive record of protecting historical sites from development, but we have several strong angles to pursue. The combination of your great-grandfather's documentation and our preliminary scientific assessment gives us a solid foundation. Jack poured more coffee for the three of them, the lack of sleep evident in their faces, but countered by the urgency of their mission. What's our first step? Filing for emergency protection under the National Historical Preservation Act, Maria replied, tapping documentation on her tablet. The site's apparent age and significance qualify it for immediate interim protection while a full assessment is conducted. That would legally prevent any disturbance, including by Greenfield or the County Historical Society, pending a comprehensive review. Thompson will fight that, Emily pointed out. He'll claim jurisdiction through the Historical Society and argue that they're the appropriate body to oversee assessment. Maria nodded grimly. Which is why we're simultaneously filing with the State Archaeological Resources Division and the Federal Historical Registry Office. Creating multiple overlapping jurisdictional claims will force a careful, transparent process rather than allowing any single entity to control access. As they refined their strategy, Jack's phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah Wilson. Urgent meeting requested. Dr. Thompson has concerns about unauthorized archaeological work on your property. Legal implications. Please call immediately. They're accelerating, Jack noted, showing the others the message, probably trying to intimidate us before we can file for protection. Too late, Maria said with quiet satisfaction, turning her laptop toward them to show a confirmation screen. Emergency protection petition submitted electronically at 6:18 this morning. They can bluster all they want, but legally, nothing can be removed or disturbed from that site until a formal review process is complete. The sound of vehicles on the gravel driveway interrupted their conversation. Jack moved to the window and felt his stomach tighten. Not one, but 3 black SUVs were approaching, along with what appeared to be a county sheriff's patrol car. That's not just Greenfield, he said quietly. They've brought reinforcements. Emily joined him at the window, her expression hardening as she recognized the lead vehicle, the Historical Society's Field Research Unit. Thompson's moving aggressively, bringing in his institutional resources before we can fully secure the site. And the sheriff, Jack added, recognizing Sheriff Dave Johnson, a man known to be closely aligned with county business interests. They're trying to overwhelm us with official presence. Maria remained calm, quickly gathering their most critical documentation. This is actually good for us. Their heavy-handed approach demonstrates exactly why independent oversight is necessary. She handed Jack a formal document. This is the emergency protection order, legally filed and binding. No one can disturb that site without federal clearance, regardless of who they've brought along for intimidation. Jack squared his shoulders, the generations of Miller stubbornness rising to the occasion. Let's meet them outside. Better to control the engagement than let them surround the house. The three stepped onto the farmhouse porch just as the vehicles parked in a semicircle in the yard. Rusty took up position beside Jack, his posture alert but not aggressive. From the lead vehicle emerged Dr. Thompson, Sarah Wilson, and a man Jack didn't recognize, carrying what appeared to be sophisticated scanning equipment. Sheriff Johnson exited his patrol car separately, his demeanor suggesting he wasn't entirely comfortable with his role in this confrontation. "Mr. Miller," Thompson called as he approached, his tone professionally cordial, though his eyes were cold. "I'm afraid we have a serious situation developing. Our preliminary scans indicate you've uncovered a site of significant historical importance and have allowed unauthorized excavation and documentation in violation of state historical preservation statutes." Sarah stepped forward, her corporate demeanor firmly in place. "Jack, we're trying to protect both your interests and the historical significance of whatever you've found. Dr. Thompson's team is properly certified for archaeological assessment, unlike," her gaze flicked dismissively toward Emily, "certain academic freelancers with questionable methodologies." Before Jack could respond, Maria stepped forward, her professional confidence evident despite being significantly shorter than everyone present. "I'm Maria Gonzalez, cultural heritage attorney. I believe you'll find this documentation relevant to your concerns." She handed copies of the emergency protection filing to both Thompson and Sheriff Johnson. "As of 6:18 this morning, this site is under federal emergency protection pending comprehensive assessment by a multi-agency team. No single institution has authority to conduct independent excavation or removal." Thompson scanned the document, his expression darkening. "This is procedurally irregular. The County Historical Society has jurisdictional priority for initial assessment of all potentially significant sites within county boundaries. That priority is superseded when nationally significant historical artifacts may be involved." Maria countered smoothly. "The multi-agency approach ensures all perspectives and interests are properly represented, including those of potentially affiliated historical organizations." Sheriff Johnson, clearly uncomfortable with the increasingly technical legal discussion, turned to Jack. "Mr. Miller, my only concern is ensuring proper procedures are followed. I'm not here to take sides, just to maintain order while these matters are sorted out." Jack appreciated the sheriff's attempt at neutrality, which suggested he wasn't completely in Greenfield's pocket. "I understand, Sheriff. We're committed to following proper legal procedures as well. That's why we've sought independent legal guidance to navigate these complex matters." Sarah, sensing the situation slipping from their control, adopted a more conciliatory tone. "Jack, we're not adversaries here. Greenfield recognizes the potential historical significance of your discovery and wants to ensure it's properly preserved. Our offer to purchase has been substantially increased to reflect this new value, and we're prepared to guarantee continued access for your family as part of any agreement." "That's very generous," Jack replied carefully, "but I'm not making any decisions about ownership or access until the full significance of this discovery is properly established through independent assessment." Thompson, less adept at concealing his frustration, stepped closer. "Mr. Miller, you're well outside your depth here. This discovery, whatever its nature, requires expert handling and institutional resources far beyond what you or Dr. Carter can provide. The Historical Society has been studying this region's archaeological significance for over a century." "That's precisely what concerns us," Emily interjected, meeting Thompson's gaze directly. Your institution's century-long interest in this specific property, dating back to Professor Whitaker's interactions with William Miller in the 1890s, suggests a predetermined agenda rather than objective scientific inquiry. The reference to Whitaker visibly startled Thompson, his composure momentarily cracking. "You've been reading old journals and constructing conspiracy theories, Dr. Carter. Hardly the basis for scientific or legal determinations." "On the contrary," Maria responded, "contemporaneous documentation of institutional pressure spanning multiple generations creates a compelling case for independent oversight rather than allowing the very organization implicated in that documentation to control assessment." The standoff continued for several more minutes, with Thompson alternating between professional courtesy and thinly veiled threats about regulatory consequences, while Sarah attempted to reframe the conversation around financial benefits for Jack. Sheriff Johnson remained largely silent, clearly recognizing that the legal complexities extended beyond his jurisdiction. Finally, recognizing that their initial intimidation strategy had failed, Thompson shifted tactics. "We'll review this emergency protection filing with our legal team. In the meantime, I trust you'll ensure no further unauthorized access to the site occurs." He handed Jack his card with a number handwritten on the back. "When you're ready to discuss this reasonably, without the adversarial legal posturing, call me directly. There are aspects to this discovery that may be far more significant and potentially valuable than you realize." As the vehicles departed, Jack, Emily, and Maria exchanged glances, recognizing the veiled offer in Thompson's parting words. "What did he mean by valuable?" Jack asked once they were alone again. Emily shook her head. "It's a common tactic, suggesting some extraordinary worth to justify emergency institutional intervention. But there's something else happening here. Thompson knows more about what's down there than he should, even accounting for whatever records the Historical Society might have maintained. And he's worried." "That emergency filing caught them off guard," Maria added. "They expected to simply overwhelm you with institutional authority and take control of the site immediately." They returned to the kitchen to regroup. The confrontation, having confirmed the need for both vigilance and accelerated documentation. As Emily updated their digital records with notes about the morning's events, Jack pulled out one of William's later journals, searching for any mention of similar institutional pressure tactics. What he found was disturbing. In entries from 1915, William described increasingly explicit threats from representatives of what he now clearly identified as the Antiquarian Society. Threats that extended beyond financial pressure to suggestions of potential harm. March 8, 1915. Caldwell's successor, a man named Thornton, visited today with two associates whose manner suggested enforcement rather than scholarship. Their interest in the northern section has intensified following the unusual lights observed during last month's winter solstice. Thornton stated directly that certain knowledge is too significant to be left in untrained hands, and that the society would take necessary measures to secure access. The threat was thinly veiled but unmistakable. Jack showed the entry to Emily and Maria, both of whom recognized the escalating pattern matching their current situation. "Your great-grandfather documented something significant during a winter solstice," Emily noted. "Given what we've seen of the underground observatory chamber, that makes perfect sense. The site was designed specifically to observe particular celestial alignments. And this Antiquarian Society has been pursuing that knowledge for generations," Maria added. "The question is why? What makes this site so valuable that an organization would maintain interest over more than a century?" As if in answer to her question, Jack's phone chimed with an email notification from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read simply, "Regarding the Miller site. Urgent." With Emily and Maria looking over his shoulder, Jack opened the message to find a brief text and an attached image. Mr. Miller, not all within the Historical Society share Dr. Thompson's agenda. The attached photograph from our restricted archives may help you understand what you're dealing with. Exercise extreme caution. The Antiquarian Society's interest extends far beyond historical documentation. The attached image showed a black and white photograph dated 1920, depicting what appeared to be the main chamber they had explored, but with a crucial difference. The central stone map, rather than being static as they had observed it, appeared to be emitting some kind of light or energy effect that the primitive camera had captured as a blurred glow. Standing around the map were 5 men in formal attire, their expressions showing what could only be described as reverent awe. "That's impossible," Emily whispered. "The photographic technology of that era couldn't have been manipulated to create this effect. Whatever they captured was actually happening." Jack stared at the image, recognizing similarities to his great-grandfather's journal entry about unusual lights during a winter solstice. They gained access to the chamber at some point, but how? The entrance we discovered showed no signs of previous disturbance. "There must be another way in," Maria concluded. "One they discovered but subsequently lost access to, which would explain their persistent attempts to acquire the property legally." Emily was already pulling up their ground-penetrating radar scans on her laptop. "Look here," she said, indicating a section they hadn't fully explored. This linear feature extending toward the county road could be another passageway, possibly an original entrance that became blocked or concealed over time. The anonymous email and historical photograph added urgent new dimensions to their understanding. Whatever lay beneath Oakridge Farm wasn't just archaeologically significant, it apparently possessed some property or capability that had inspired century-long pursuit by a secretive organization willing to employ increasingly aggressive tactics. "We need to complete our documentation immediately," Emily decided, "especially of the observatory chamber and any astronomical alignments it might track. If the Antiquarian Society accessed the site during a specific celestial event and observed something significant, we need to understand what they were pursuing." Jack checked the calendar on his phone. Winter solstice is less than 2 weeks away. He paused, thinking, the longest night of the year. If we're going to conduct additional exploration, now's the time before they can mobilize legal countermeasures to our protection filing. As they prepared for another descent into the chambers, Jack felt the weight of responsibility his great-grandfather had carried for decades, the burden of protecting something extraordinary from those who would exploit it for purposes unknown. But unlike William, who had maintained solitary vigilance, Jack had found allies with the expertise and commitment to help him navigate these treacherous waters. Whatever secrets lay hidden beneath the rocky northern slope of Oakridge Farm, Jack was determined they would be revealed and protected on terms that honored both his family's legacy and the remarkable people who had created them, not controlled by a shadowy organization that had waited generations to claim them. Equipped with enhanced documentation tools and additional safety gear, Jack, Emily, and Maria descended into the underground complex for a more thorough exploration. The main chamber remained as they had left it, the artifacts untouched, but with their improved lighting system, new details emerged from the shadows. Intricate carvings along the upper walls depicted celestial bodies, mathematical symbols etched into supporting columns, and subtle color variations in the stonework suggesting specific minerals had been selected for their properties rather than convenience. The level of astronomical and mathematical knowledge displayed here is extraordinary, Emily remarked, as she carefully photographed a sequence of symbols that appeared to represent star movements. These aren't just decorative patterns. They're sophisticated calculations tracking celestial cycles over extremely long time periods. Maria, though not an archaeologist, contributed valuable perspective from her work with historical preservation. The symbolism here shares elements, with several documented 19th century secret societies, but combines them in ways I've never encountered in historical records. It's as if we're looking at a completely unknown organization that somehow bridged multiple intellectual traditions. Their primary focus was the observatory chamber, with its complex arrangement of reflection pools and precisely positioned apertures. Emily had brought specialized mapping equipment to document the exact alignment of each opening relative to celestial coordinates. Based on these alignments, she explained after taking several measurements, this observatory was designed to track not just the standard solstices and equinoxes, but also specific star systems and what appears to be a recurring 19-year lunar cycle known as the Metonic cycle. The winter solstice, Jack said, recalling his great-grandfather's journal entries. William mentioned unusual lights during that specific time. Emily nodded, impressed by his insight. Exactly. And according to my calculations, the upcoming solstice will feature a particularly rare alignment visible from these precise coordinates. A full moon coinciding with the solstice, which only happens approximately every 19 years. The timing sent a chill through the group. William's journal had mentioned unusual lights during a winter solstice, and the mysterious photograph showed some kind of energy phenomenon during what may have been a similar event. This can't be coincidence, Maria observed. Thompson's sudden urgency, the escalation from Greenfield. They know about the upcoming solstice and want control of the site before it occurs. They continued their exploration, following the passage that extended beyond the observatory chamber. After about 60 feet, it opened into a third chamber they hadn't previously discovered, smaller than the others, but even more puzzling in its contents. At the center stood what appeared to be a mechanism, not a simple artifact, but an integrated system of stone, metal, and crystal components arranged in concentric circles around a central pedestal. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, showing precision that seemed impossible for 19th century tools to achieve. Most remarkable were the crystal elements, clear quartz-like structures cut with mathematical perfection into specific geometric forms. Emily trailed off, at a loss for words as she circled the mechanism. I have no archaeological context for something like this. The technological sophistication required to create these components goes beyond anything documented in Civil War-era engineering. Jack approached carefully, noting how the central pedestal aligned perfectly with an aperture in the ceiling, another connection to the sky above, but focused on a much smaller field of view than those in the observatory chamber. It's designed to channel something, he suggested, tracing the arrangement with his light. Light or energy focused through these crystals and directed around these circular tracks. Maria was documenting everything with her camera, her legal training giving way to simple human wonder. Whatever culture built this had knowledge we've lost or never discovered. This isn't primitive technology. It's just different technology than what our civilization developed. Indeed, as they studied the mechanism chamber, Emily's attention was drawn to inscriptions encircling the room at eye level. A continuous band of symbols, more elaborate than those they'd seen elsewhere. This appears to be instructional, she said, after studying a section carefully, not just decorative or commemorative, but actual operational guidance for the mechanism, if we could translate it. The implications of what they were documenting grew increasingly profound. They had discovered not just artifacts from a historical period, but apparent technology based on principles unfamiliar to modern science. Technology specifically designed to interact with celestial alignments that occurred on predictable but rare cycles. After several hours of intensive documentation, they reluctantly prepared to return to the surface. As they gathered their equipment, Jack noticed something they had overlooked: a small alcove partially hidden behind a projecting stone column. Inside was a single object, a handheld device resembling a sophisticated compass or astronomical instrument, crafted from the same materials as the larger mechanism. "Should we take this for closer study?" he asked, hesitant to remove anything from the site, but recognizing the potential value of examining one component in detail. Emily considered carefully. "Normally, I would insist everything remain in situ until a full scientific assessment is complete, but given the unusual circumstances and the likely attempts by Thompson to seize control of the site." She nodded slowly. "Yes, one artifact for analysis might be justified, particularly if it helps us understand the larger mechanism's purpose." Jack carefully wrapped the device in protective cloth and secured it in his pack. As they ascended to the surface, each was lost in their own thoughts about the extraordinary implications of what lay beneath Oakridge Farm. Emerging into late afternoon sunlight, they were immediately aware that something had changed. A drone hovered at the legal minimum altitude over the property, obviously monitoring their activities. More concerning was the temporary roadblock they could see at the farm's entrance. Not official police barricades, but private security vehicles strategically positioned to control access. "They're escalating again," Maria observed grimly, "probably trying to isolate us until they can find a legal workaround to our protection filing. We should get our documentation secured immediately." Emily suggested transferring files from her equipment to encrypted drives and making copies housed in multiple locations. Jack checked his phone to find several missed calls and messages from Sarah Wilson, from his bank, and most alarmingly, from the county tax assessor's office announcing an emergency reassessment of his property value based on newly discovered historical assets. "They're attacking from multiple angles," he said, showing the others the tax notification, "trying to force a financial crisis even if they can't directly access the site." Maria scanned the notice with a lawyer's precision. "This is legally questionable, but would take months to challenge effectively. They're counting on immediate financial pressure to force your cooperation." As they secured their equipment and documentation in Emily's car, a new message appeared on Jack's phone from the same anonymous email address that had sent the historical photograph. "Miller, Thompson has convinced National Historical Registry to conduct emergency assessment tomorrow morning. Claims imminent threat to irreplaceable cultural assets. Federal jurisdiction would supersede your protection filing. Society members will accompany team as consultants. Whatever you discovered must be documented independently before they arrive." The message confirmed their fears. Thompson and his antiquarian society were mobilizing institutional resources to overwhelm their legal protections. By the following morning, they could lose control of the site entirely. Back in the farmhouse, they held an urgent strategy session. Emily connected remotely with archaeological colleagues from several universities, sharing selected documentation and securing commitments for independent verification of their findings. Maria activated her network of historical preservation attorneys, creating additional layers of legal protection through national heritage claims. Through these efforts, they established a distributed knowledge base that couldn't be easily suppressed or controlled. The discovery's existence and significance now documented by multiple independent experts across different institutions. As night fell, they turned their attention to the artifact Jack had retrieved, the handheld device from the mechanism chamber. Under controlled lighting in the kitchen, Emily carefully examined it, documenting every detail before attempting to understand its function. "The craftsmanship is extraordinary," she noted, studying the precision-cut crystal components and intricate metalwork. These aren't cast metals, but appear to have been shaped through some kind of precise machining technique that shouldn't have been widely available in the 1860s. The device featured concentric rotating rings around a central crystal, with markings that appeared to correspond to astronomical alignments. As Emily carefully manipulated the components, Jack noticed something unexpected. Faint traces of luminescence activating within the crystal, visible only in near darkness. "It's responding to movement," he observed, dimming the lights further, "or perhaps to the specific alignment of the rings." Through careful experimentation, they discovered that certain configurations of the rotating elements caused the central crystal to emit a soft blue luminescence. Not bright enough to illuminate the room, but clearly an intentional effect, rather than simple reflection. "This is some form of energy activation," Emily hypothesized, her scientific training struggling to contextualize the phenomenon. The crystal structure somehow responds to specific geometric alignments, but the power source is completely unclear. There's no battery, no fuel, no obvious energy input. As they continued experimenting with the device, their scientific curiosity was tempered by growing ethical questions. Were they equipped to responsibly handle technology they didn't understand, created by a culture whose knowledge had been lost for over a century? Should such discoveries be shared widely, potentially transforming scientific understanding, but also creating unknown risks? "We're at a pivotal decision point," Maria observed, giving voice to what they were all feeling. "Beyond the immediate legal battle, we need to determine the right course for this discovery in the longer term. Museums, academic research, private preservation. Each path has profound implications." The question hung in the air as they considered their options. Jack felt the weight of his great-grandfather's legacy and his own responsibility as the accidental steward of this remarkable discovery. The financial pressures threatening his farm suddenly seemed small compared to the larger questions of historical and cultural significance. What would happen if Thompson and his antiquarian society gained control? He asked, bringing the discussion back to their immediate challenge. Emily's expression darkened. "Based on their century-long pursuit and the secrecy they've maintained, I doubt their intentions align with open scientific inquiry or cultural respect." The photograph we received suggests they've witnessed something extraordinary during previous access to the site, something they've kept hidden rather than shared with the scientific community. "And they're desperate to regain access before the solstice in less than 2 weeks," Maria added. "Whatever they experienced or expect to happen during that astronomical alignment, they want to control it completely." As midnight approached, they reached a difficult consensus. They would need to reveal enough about their discovery to secure broader protection, while withholding specific details about the mechanism chamber and its apparent technological function. "Until proper scientific protocols can be established, we should focus on the archaeological and cultural significance," Emily suggested. "The evidence of advanced mathematical knowledge, astronomical observation, and sophisticated construction techniques. That's enough to justify comprehensive protection without immediately introducing elements that might trigger either scientific skepticism or dangerous curiosity." Jack agreed with this measured approach, though he felt increasingly certain that the full significance of what lay beneath his farm extended far beyond conventional archaeology. Whatever the ancient builders had created was designed to function during specific celestial alignments, to channel, focus, or perhaps even generate energy through means not yet understood by modern science. As they finalized their strategy for confronting the next day's challenges, Jack found himself contemplating the broader implications of their discovery. Beyond the immediate battle with Thompson and Greenfield, beyond even the scientific revolution, the site might trigger, there were profound questions about humanity's past and future. What kind of organization had created this technology? Why had knowledge of their achievements been lost? And perhaps most importantly, what wisdom might they have encoded in their creation that modern society needed to rediscover? The artifact in their possession, quietly glowing in the darkened kitchen, represented just a fragment of that hidden knowledge. A tantalizing glimpse into an intellectual tradition developed along entirely different principles than those that had shaped the modern world. Understanding it properly would require not just scientific analysis, but historical and philosophical context that might take years or decades to reconstruct. As Jack finally retired to his bedroom for a few hours of needed rest, he found himself reflecting on his great-grandfather's words about the site's significance. Not from greed, but from deep conviction that some discoveries belong not to individuals or institutions, but to humanity itself. The crisis threatening his family farm had unexpectedly transformed into something far larger. A battle not just for his personal legacy, but for control of knowledge that could transform understanding of human history and capability. Whatever the coming days might bring, Jack was determined to honor both his family's stewardship and the remarkable people whose works they had uncovered, ensuring their discovery served the greater good rather than narrow institutional or corporate interests. Outside the farmhouse, unnoticed by its occupants, the device they had brought to the surface was affecting subtle changes in its environment. Compass needles in nearby equipment slowly shifted from true north. Electronic devices experienced minor power fluctuations, and for brief moments, the night sky above Oakridge Farm displayed faint atmospheric phenomena, invisible to casual observation, but detectable to the sophisticated monitoring equipment now surrounding the property. The ancient technology was awakening, responding to stimuli it had been designed to detect over a century before modern civilization had developed. And as the winter solstice approached, its effects would only grow stronger. Dawn broke over Oakridge Farm with golden light that belied the tension of the coming confrontation. Jack stood on his porch with a mug of coffee, watching the road for the inevitable arrival of Thompson's emergency assessment team. Rusty lay at his feet, the dog's usual playfulness replaced by a watchful alertness that mirrored his owner's mood. Inside, Emily and Maria were making final preparations, organizing their documentation and legal materials for maximum impact. They had spent the pre-dawn hours implementing a sophisticated strategy, distributing key evidence to trusted colleagues across multiple institutions, establishing a secure online repository that would automatically release their findings if they didn't check in at regular intervals, and preparing concise briefing materials that highlighted the site's legitimate archaeological significance while downplaying its more inexplicable aspects. The first wave will be intimidation, Maria predicted as she organized her legal documents. Overwhelming institutional presence, vague references to regulatory authority, implied threats about the consequences of non-cooperation. Classic tactics when dealing with individuals who've discovered something valuable on their own property. Emily nodded in agreement. Then they'll shift to incentives, offers of collaboration, recognition, financial compensation. When that fails, they'll escalate to some form of manufactured emergency that requires immediate institutional intervention. Jack smiled grimly at their assessment. You've both done this before. More times than I care to remember, Maria confirmed. The patterns become predictable once you've seen them enough. Powerful interests rarely change their playbook when it's worked for generations. The artifact they had retrieved from the mechanism chamber sat on the kitchen table. its crystal components no longer glowing, but still radiating a subtle presence that had affected electronic equipment throughout the night. Emily's scientific instruments had recorded unusual energy patterns emanating from the device. Patterns that defied conventional explanation, but corresponded to the alignment of celestial bodies currently visible in the morning sky. Whatever this technology is, Emily had noted during their overnight analysis, it appears to respond to cosmic conditions rather than human intervention, like a receiver tuned to frequencies we don't fully comprehend. The sound of approaching vehicles drew them to the windows. The procession coming up the driveway was even more substantial than they had anticipated. Two large SUVs bearing historical society markings, a van with federal government plates, Sarah Wilson's now familiar Greenfield vehicle, and most concerning, an unmarked black truck with satellite communication equipment visible on its roof. "They've brought serious resources," Jack observed, counting at least 10 people emerging from the vehicles, including some we haven't encountered before. Among the new arrivals was a tall, distinguished-looking man in his 60s who moved with military precision despite his civilian clothes. Even from a distance, his air of command was evident as others deferred to his directions. He surveyed the farmhouse and surrounding property with calculated assessment, his gaze lingering on the camouflaged entrance to the underground chambers. "That's not just another academic or corporate representative," Maria murmured. "That's someone with significant authority. The real face of the antiquarian society," Emily suggested, "someone who normally remains in the background while Thompson handles the public interactions." They had little time to speculate further as the delegation approached the house. Jack stepped onto the porch to meet them, projecting a calm confidence that belied his internal tension. Rusty remained at his side, watchful but restrained. "Mr. Miller," Dr. Thompson called with forced cordiality. "We've brought the National Historical Registry Assessment Team as discussed yesterday. Given the potential significance of your discovery, the registry has authorized emergency evaluation protocols under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act." The distinguished older man stepped forward, extending his hand. Colonel James Harrington, retired, now serving as Special Advisor to the Historical Registry's Critical Heritage Division. "A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Miller, despite the unusual circumstances." Jack shook the offered hand, noting the firm grip and evaluating gaze. "I wasn't aware the Historical Registry had a Critical Heritage Division, Colonel." A flicker of appreciation crossed Harrington's face at Jack's directness. "It's a specialized unit, activated only for discoveries of exceptional significance. Dr. Thompson's preliminary report suggested your property might qualify." Before Jack could respond, Emily and Maria emerged from the house, positioning themselves strategically on either side of him, a united front against the institutional delegation. "I believe introductions are in order," Maria stated professionally. "I'm Maria Gonzalez, cultural heritage attorney representing Mr. Miller's interests in this matter, and this is Dr. Emily Carter, archaeological consultant conducting preliminary scientific assessment of the site." Thompson's expression tightened at their formal presentation, but Colonel Harrington seemed unsurprised, even expectant. "Ms. Gonzalez, Dr. Carter, your reputations precede you. Perhaps we could continue this conversation inside, away from the morning chill." The request was reasonable, but represented the first tactical move, entering Jack's personal space, establishing a more controlled environment for their discussion. After a moment's consideration, Jack nodded his agreement, but countered with his own condition. "The kitchen table should accommodate us all. I'd prefer to keep this initial meeting centralized rather than having people wandering the property independently. Once seated around the kitchen table, the artifact carefully removed and secured in Emily's vehicle beforehand, the true negotiations began. Colonel Harrington took the lead, his approach more straightforward than Thompson's academic posturing. "Mr. Miller, let's address the situation directly. You've discovered something significant beneath your property, something with profound historical implications. Our responsibility is to ensure proper preservation and scientific evaluation of such discoveries, particularly when they may contribute to understanding of 19th century technological developments. A responsibility we fully support," Maria interjected smoothly, "which is why we've already implemented comprehensive documentation protocols and filed for appropriate protective designations under both federal and state heritage statutes." Harrington nodded, acknowledging their preparedness. "Commendable initiative. However, the nature of this particular discovery may exceed standard archaeological parameters, necessitating specialized expertise and security measures beyond conventional preservation frameworks." Emily leaned forward slightly. "What exactly do you mean by exceeding standard archaeological parameters, Colonel? Our preliminary assessment indicates an advanced 19th century site with exceptional architectural and astronomical features, but nothing that would fall outside established archaeological evaluation methodologies." It was a calculated challenge, forcing Harrington to either reveal more about what the Antiquarian Society knew or accept their characterization of the discovery as merely an exceptional but conventional archaeological site. The colonel studied Emily for a moment before responding. "Dr. Carter, both your reputation and the evidence visible in your preliminary documentation suggest you've observed anomalous features inconsistent with conventional understanding of Civil War-era technological capabilities, features similar to those documented in certain other sites of interest to our division." This unexpected acknowledgement of other sites caught them by surprise. The implication that the chambers beneath Oakridge Farm weren't unique, that similar discoveries had been made and apparently classified, shifted the conversational dynamics significantly. Jack decided to test the boundaries of this new openness. Like the site accessed by members of the Antiquarian Society in 1920, the one where unusual energy phenomena were photographed during a winter solstice. The reaction around the table was immediate. Thompson's face paled visibly. Sarah Wilson looked confused, and several of the presumed federal representatives exchanged concerned glances. Only Colonel Harrington maintained his composure, though his eyes narrowed slightly in reassessment. "You've been conducting historical research beyond the physical exploration," he observed. "Impressive resourcefulness, Mr. Miller." "Yes, there are documented precedents for certain phenomena associated with sites of this particular construction style, which is precisely why specialized oversight is appropriate." The acknowledgement represented a significant shift from denial to limited disclosure, a tactical adjustment suggesting Harrington was authorized to reveal more than Thompson had been. Jack exchanged quick glances with Emily and Maria, all recognizing the opportunity to push for additional information. "Colonel," Jack said carefully, "my family has been stewards of this land for over a century, often under pressure from interests seeking access to what my great-grandfather discovered beneath it. Before we discuss any form of institutional involvement, we need to understand exactly what you know about the site's true nature and significance." Harrington considered this request, his military background evident in his methodical evaluation of options before responding. "Fair enough, but such a discussion would necessarily include information classified under national security protocols. I'm prepared to provide that context, but only under appropriate confidentiality agreements." Maria immediately countered, "Any agreements would need to preserve our client's rights to maintain independent documentation and assessment. with clearly defined parameters around what specifically constitutes sensitive information versus general archaeological findings. For the next hour, a careful negotiation unfolded around the kitchen table, not the intimidation tactics they had anticipated, but a genuine, if cautious, exchange between parties with different priorities but potentially aligned interests. Colonel Harrington revealed himself to be neither the academic zealot that Thompson embodied, nor the corporate opportunist represented by Sarah Wilson, but something more complex. A government official genuinely concerned with both scientific understanding and security implications. As the technical details of a potential collaborative assessment were hammered out by Maria and the federal legal representative, Colonel Harrington requested a private word with Jack. They stepped onto the porch, the morning sun now high overhead. "Mr. Miller, I want to be direct with you, outside the formal negotiations. What you've discovered is one of 5 known sites with similar characteristics identified across the eastern United States. The technology these sites contain appears to operate on principles not fully understood by modern science, with capabilities that activate during specific astronomical alignments." Jack maintained a neutral expression despite his surprise at this candor. "Like the winter solstice occurring in 10 days? Harrington nodded. "Precisely. During previous alignments, observed effects have included localized electromagnetic anomalies, gravitational fluctuations, and in one documented case, a temporary manifestation phenomenon with characteristics suggesting non-local connectivity." "Non-local connectivity," Jack repeated carefully. "You mean a connection to somewhere else?" That would be an oversimplification, but not entirely inaccurate. Harrington gazed across the farm's fields, his expression thoughtful. "Mr. Miller, the organization you know as the Antiquarian Society began as a legitimate scientific body in the 1880s, dedicated to documenting anomalous archaeological discoveries that challenged conventional historical narratives. Over time, it evolved into something more problematic. A quasi-religious order convinced these sites represented contact points with advanced intelligences. Jack processed this revelation, connecting it with passages from his great-grandfather's journals. And now it exists as a shadow of its former self. A few dedicated zealots like Thompson operating within legitimate institutions, but pursuing an agenda inconsistent with objective scientific investigation. My division was established precisely to prevent such groups from controlling access to these sites, while also ensuring their study proceeds under appropriate protocols. The sincerity in Harrington's manner was compelling, but Jack remained cautious. "Why should I trust your division more than the Historical Society or Greenfield?" "You shouldn't, not without verification," Harrington replied frankly. "Which is why I'm proposing a genuinely collaborative approach. Your team maintains independent documentation and oversight. Our resources provide security and specialized analysis capabilities, shared access under mutual monitoring." It was a far cry from the institutional takeover they had feared, a recognition of their legitimate role as stakeholders rather than obstacles to be removed. As they rejoined the others inside, Jack could see that similar progress had been made. In the technical discussions, with Maria looking cautiously satisfied rather than defensively vigilant. "We've outlined a preliminary framework for collaborative assessment," she informed him. "Independent teams with complementary expertise, transparent information sharing with clearly defined security protocols, and most importantly, no removal of artifacts or alteration of the site without unanimous agreement from all participating entities." They've also agreed to include representatives from historical preservation organizations with potential connection to the Underground Railroad network Emily added, a significant concession that aligns with best practices in cultural heritage management. The atmosphere around the kitchen table had transformed from confrontational to cautiously collaborative, though Jack noted that Thompson remained visibly displeased with this resolution, and Sarah Wilson appeared to be re-evaluating Greenfield's position in light of the federal involvement. As the meeting concluded and the various representatives prepared to depart, Colonel Harrington had one final question for Jack. There's the matter of any artifacts you may have already removed from the site for preliminary study. Our agreement would ideally include full disclosure of all materials previously extracted. Jack met his gaze steadily. Once the formal collaboration agreement is signed and verified by our legal counsel, we'll provide complete documentation of everything we've discovered, including any items temporarily removed for analysis. Harrington accepted this conditional commitment with a nod of understanding. I look forward to working with you and your team, Mr. Miller. What lies beneath your farm may change our understanding not just of American history, but of technological possibilities we've only begun to comprehend. As the procession of vehicles departed down the driveway, Jack, Emily, and Maria gathered on the porch to assess this unexpected turn of events. That wasn't the confrontation we prepared for, Emily observed, watching the dust settle on the gravel road. No, Maria agreed. Harrington represents a different approach entirely, professional, pragmatic, and apparently authorized to pursue collaborative rather than adversarial resolution. Jack considered the morning's developments thoughtfully. The question is whether this collaboration is genuine or simply a more sophisticated strategy to gain control of the site. Harrington revealed more than I expected about other similar discoveries and the historical context of the antiquarian society. Too much for it to be a simple tactical deception. That level of disclosure creates vulnerability they wouldn't risk unless they're genuinely seeking cooperation, Emily suggested. As they continued discussing the implications, Jack's phone chimed with a message from the anonymous source who had previously provided the historical photograph. Harrington can be trusted conditionally. Division established 1994 after Tennessee. Incident: Thompson not informed of full protocol. Proceed with verification, but potential for legitimate collaboration exists. Additional documentation available if needed. The message reinforced their cautious optimism while confirming their instinct to maintain independent verification of all claims. Whatever lay ahead, formal collaboration, continued legal maneuvering, or preparation for the approaching winter solstice, they had successfully navigated the initial institutional confrontation with their autonomy intact. Jack looked out over his family's farm, the land that had sustained generations of millers and concealed an extraordinary secret beneath its seemingly ordinary surface. The financial threat of foreclosure now seemed remote, given the site's acknowledged significance, but larger questions loomed about his responsibility as the steward of a discovery, with implications extending far beyond agriculture or archaeology. So we proceed with the collaboration, he asked his allies, seeking their counsel before committing to this new path. Emily nodded thoughtfully. With appropriate safeguards and independent verification at every stage, the resources they can provide, especially as the solstice approaches, could be crucial for understanding the site's full significance. And we maintain our distributed documentation and legal protections, Maria added. Trust but verify, with multiple layers of accountability. As they began planning for this new collaborative phase, the artifact secured in Emily's vehicle emitted a brief, intense pulse of energy, undetected by human senses, but registering on instruments monitoring the property from both Colonel Harrington's departing vehicles and others positioned more discreetly along the county boundaries. The ancient technology was continuing its gradual reactivation, responding to cosmic conditions as they incrementally aligned toward the approaching winter solstice. Whatever purpose its creators had designed it to fulfill, that purpose would soon be fully expressed for the first time in over a century. Witnessed by a unique collaboration between a farmer fighting to save his legacy, scientists seeking understanding, and institutions pursuing knowledge they couldn't fully control. 10 days after Jack Miller's tractor had broken through the earth into an ancient mystery, Oakridge Farm had transformed into something between a scientific research station and a secured historical site. The collaborative agreement had proven genuine, with Colonel Harrington's division providing resources and expertise while honoring Jack, Emily, and Maria's continued oversight role. The artifact they had retrieved, now carefully monitored in a specialized containment unit, had continued to display increasingly active energy signatures as the solstice approached. Analysis of its components had revealed materials and manufacturing techniques that defied conventional historical understanding, suggesting capabilities far beyond what was believed possible during the Civil War era. More significantly, cross-referencing with Harrington's classified records had established connections between the Oakridge site and 4 other similar discoveries across the eastern United States, all apparently constructed during the same historical period by a network of individuals whose identities remained largely unknown, but whose technical knowledge had clearly exceeded the documented capabilities of their time. "We've identified what appears to be a consistent pattern," explained Dr. Amara Patel, the quantum physicist Harrington had brought onto the team. She gestured to holographic projections showing energy measurements from the artifact. These emissions fluctuate in harmony with specific cosmic cycles, not just the obvious solar and lunar patterns, but correlations with stellar positions that wouldn't have been detectable without advanced instrumentation. Almost as if they understood principles of quantum entanglement centuries before modern physics formalized the concept, Emily added, having spent the past week working closely with the scientific team to merge archaeological context with cutting-edge analysis. The underground complex had been carefully secured, with state-of-the-art monitoring equipment installed throughout the chambers, but minimal physical alteration to preserve the site's integrity. The mechanism chamber had become the primary focus, with specialized instruments tracking its gradual activation as the solstice approached. Jack had continued managing his farm operations around this sudden transformation, finding unexpected support from Colonel Harrington's team in addressing the financial pressures that had initially driven him to clear the northern section. A preliminary historical designation had halted the threatened foreclosure, and whispers of the discovery's significance had already led to discreet inquiries from major universities and research institutions about long-term preservation funding. Sarah Wilson had withdrawn from active involvement, Greenfield Agricultural Developments having reassessed their interest in the property once federal authorities became involved. Dr. Thompson, however, maintained a peripheral presence. His position as County Historical Society president giving him limited but legitimate access to general briefings, though he was pointedly excluded from the more sensitive aspects of the research. 3 days before the winter solstice, Jack found himself standing at the edge of his property with Colonel Harrington, watching as specialized equipment was positioned around the farm's perimeter. "These sensors will help us establish a comprehensive monitoring field for when the alignment peaks," Harrington explained. "Based on data from similar sites during previous activations, we anticipate significant electromagnetic anomalies extending well beyond the immediate underground complex." "You've observed this before," Jack stated rather than asked, studying the colonel's expression. "At the other sites you mentioned." Harrington nodded, his military reserve softening slightly as he'd come to respect Jack's direct approach. 3 documented instances since we established the division, each unique in specific manifestations but consistent in fundamental principles. He paused, choosing his words carefully. What your great-grandfather protected, perhaps without fully understanding its implications, may be the most intact example we've encountered, because it remained sealed and undisturbed. Precisely. The others were compromised to varying degrees, damaged through improper access attempts, deliberately altered by individuals seeking to control rather than understand their function, or simply degraded through time and environmental factors. This site's remarkable preservation offers an unprecedented opportunity. Jack contemplated this as they walked back toward the farmhouse. You still haven't fully explained why these sites were built in the first place, or by whom. Because we don't know with absolute certainty, Harrington admitted. The historical record is fragmentary at best, deliberately obscured at worst. What we've pieced together suggests a network of individuals operating during the Civil War period who possessed knowledge well beyond their contemporaries, some formally educated, others self-taught, united by a shared understanding of principles that wouldn't be recognized by conventional science for decades or even centuries. The Underground Railroad connection isn't coincidental, is it? Jack asked, making connections between various historical threads they'd uncovered in Williams' journals and Harrington's classified files. We believe it provided ideal cover for their activities, a secret network already established with legitimate humanitarian purpose through which these individuals could move, communicate, and construct their sites while attention was focused on the more visible aspects of the conflict. This aligned with Emily's latest research, which had uncovered tantalizing references in abolitionist correspondence to individuals with unusual scientific backgrounds who had contributed to the Freedom Network while pursuing what were cryptically described as higher harmonies and celestial alignments. As they approached the farmhouse, Emily emerged from the improvised research center that had been established in what was once Jack's barn. Her expression conveyed urgency rather than alarm. We're detecting increased activity from the mechanism chamber, she reported, tablet in hand displaying real-time measurements. The energy signatures have shifted to a new pattern, consistent with what we predicted for the pre-solstice phase, but accelerating faster than our models anticipated. Harrington's response was immediate and measured, activating his communication device to alert the full research team without creating unnecessary alarm. Advance the monitoring protocol to level 3. I want comprehensive data collection across all parameters. Inside the research center, screens displayed multiple views of the underground chambers, where specialized equipment tracked everything from temperature fluctuations to quantum-level energy signatures. Dr. Patel and her team of physicists worked alongside archaeologists and historical experts in an unprecedented collaboration, their diverse perspectives creating a more comprehensive understanding than any single discipline could have achieved. The central mechanism is responding to the approaching alignment, Dr. Patel explained, indicating oscillating patterns on one of the primary monitors. These energy levels have doubled in the past 6 hours, with harmonics extending throughout the chamber complex. And we're detecting what appear to be resonant responses from the surface stones, added Dr. Marcus Chen, the geophysicist who had been mapping energy pathways through the property. The rocky formations that frustrated generations of farming attempts aren't random. They're precisely positioned to channel and amplify whatever energy the underground system generates. Jack watched as this team of world-class experts analyzed the discovery his simple farming decision had unexpectedly revealed. The technical terminology often exceeded his understanding, but the underlying implication was clear. What lay beneath his land represented technology operating on principles that modern science was still struggling to fully comprehend. 2 days until peak alignment, Harrington noted, studying the projected celestial charts. We need to finalize observation protocols and safety parameters. 3. As the team dispersed to their respective tasks, Jack found himself standing beside the artifact containment unit, watching as the handheld device they had retrieved pulsed with increasingly visible energy, its crystal components now glowing steadily even under normal lighting conditions. Emily joined him, her initial academic skepticism having evolved into cautious wonder as the evidence had mounted. "Your great-grandfather knew this day would come," she said quietly. Not the specific date, perhaps, but he understood that what he was protecting would eventually need to be witnessed. Jack nodded, recalling William's journal entries about the proper time and the right guardian. What had seemed like philosophical musings now carried the weight of prediction. "I just wanted to save my farm," he said with a hint of irony. Emily smiled. "Instead, you might be helping to reveal principles that could transform our understanding of energy, physics, and history simultaneously. Not bad for a season's work." Their moment of reflection was interrupted by a perimeter. Alarm, unusual movement detected at the farm's northern boundary. The security team immediately activated protocols, but the cause proved to be neither hostile nor random. A group of 3 individuals had approached the property line, an elderly man and 2 younger companions, all with formal documentation, identifying them as representatives of a historical society dedicated to documenting Underground Railroad sites. They had requested a meeting with the property owner, claiming information relevant to the discovery. Colonel Harrington's team conducted thorough background verification before Jack agreed to meet with them, with appropriate security measures in place. The elderly man introduced himself as Abraham Jefferson, a historian whose family connection to the Underground Railroad extended back to its operational period. "What you've discovered, Mr. Miller," he began, once they were seated in the farmhouse kitchen, "was known among certain families as a harmony station, different from the standard safe houses that most historical accounts document." He carefully unfolded aged papers protected in archival sleeves, handwritten letters and diagrams preserved through generations. "My great-great-grandfather was among those who helped construct and maintain these sites." He described them as instruments of alignment, designed to demonstrate principles that the world wasn't yet ready to embrace. The documents, once authenticated, provided missing context that neither William's journals nor Harrington's classified files had contained. Names, dates, and most significantly, the stated purpose behind the network of sites they had constructed. They called themselves the Celestial Harmonic Society, Jefferson explained, individuals from diverse backgrounds united by their recognition that certain natural forces could be channeled and amplified through precisely aligned structures during specific astronomical configurations. What was the purpose of these amplifications?" Harrington asked, maintaining professional neutrality despite the significance of this historical revelation. Jefferson's expression grew solemn. "According to my family's records, they believed they were establishing a network that would eventually demonstrate the underlying unity of all natural forces, physical, astronomical, perhaps even spiritual, not as religious doctrine, but as observable scientific principle. They knew their work would be misunderstood in their own time, seen as either madness or threatening to established order, so they encoded their knowledge in these sites, designed to activate during specific celestial alignments across generations." This account aligned with the energy measurements they had been recording, a system designed not for immediate effect, but for long-term demonstration during precisely calculated future moments. As Jefferson shared more from his family's carefully preserved records, Jack found himself contemplating the extraordinary convergence of circumstances that had led to this moment. His financial distress, his decision to clear that particular section of land, the approaching solstice alignment, and now the arrival of individuals carrying historical knowledge passed through generations. The winter solstice was now just 2 days away, and the activation patterns in the underground complex continued to intensify. The research team worked around the clock, documenting every change and preparing for what all evidence suggested would be a significant demonstration of whatever principles the site's creators had encoded in their remarkable construction. On the eve of the solstice, Jack stood at the edge of his northern field, watching as the final preparations were completed. The site that had frustrated generations of farming attempts had been transformed into what might prove to be one of the most significant scientific observation posts of the century. Specialized equipment surrounded the underground complex, while a carefully selected team of observers prepared to witness whatever manifestation occurred at the moment of peak alignment. Emily joined him as dusk settled over the farm, the first stars becoming visible in the darkening sky. "Your land will never be the same," she observed. "Neither will our understanding of history." Jack nodded, feeling both the weight and privilege of his unexpected role in this unfolding discovery. William would be satisfied, I think. He protected something he didn't fully understand because he recognized its importance transcended his own interests. "A worthy family tradition," Emily replied with a smile. Together they walked back toward the illuminated research center, where the world's leading experts in multiple disciplines had gathered to witness an activation that had been set in motion over a century and a half ago. A demonstration of principles encoded by individuals whose vision had extended far beyond their own lifetime. The ancient technology beneath Oakridge Farm continued its measured awakening, responding to cosmic alignments that had been precisely calculated by its creators. As midnight approached, the energy signatures emanating from the underground complex reached levels that challenged conventional scientific explanation, generating patterns that resonated with the stars now positioned directly overhead. The winter solstice, the longest night of the year, had arrived, bringing with it the culmination of a mystery that had spanned generations, protected by a family that had never fully understood what lay beneath their land, but had recognized their responsibility as stewards of something extraordinary. The night of the winter solstice arrived with unexpected clarity. The sky above Oakridge Farm crystalline and star-filled, despite the typical December cloud cover that usually blanketed the region. Jack stood at the edge of the northern field, his breath visible in the cold air as he watched the final preparations being made around the site. The collaborative team had established observation posts at strategic points, specialized equipment humming quietly as it monitored the underground chambers. Emily approached, carrying 2 steaming mugs. "Hot coffee," she offered, handing one to Jack. "Dr. Patel says energy readings from the mechanism are already twice what they were yesterday. Whatever's going to happen, it's starting." Colonel Harrington's team had established a command center in the barn, where dozens of monitors displayed real-time data from the underground complex. The artifact they had discovered was now positioned back in its original place within the central mechanism, its crystal components glowing with increasing intensity as midnight approached. "It's time," Harrington announced as the celestial alignment reached its peak. "Let's witness what your great-grandfather protected all these years." Jack, Emily, and a small group of key researchers descended into the underground observatory chamber. The transformation was immediate and undeniable. The water channels that had been carefully filled now reflected the star patterns visible through the ceiling apertures, but with an added dimension. Lines of blue energy connecting specific points in patterns that matched the mathematical symbols etched into the surrounding walls. The central mechanism in the deepest chamber had fully activated, its components rotating silently along paths that defied conventional mechanics. No motor or power source drove this movement, only the precise alignment of cosmic forces that occurred during this specific solstice, coupled with the unique properties of the materials used in its construction. As they watched in awe, the mechanism generated a field of visible energy that coalesced into three-dimensional projections. Detailed models of atomic structures, planetary movements, and energy wave patterns that pulsed in harmony with one another. This wasn't simple holography or illusion, but something more fundamental, information encoded into the fabric of reality itself, made visible through principles the site's builders had understood over a century before modern science had even conceived of such possibilities. "It's a demonstration model," whispered Dr. Patel, her scientific skepticism momentarily overcome. They created a system to reveal natural laws that wouldn't be discovered for generations. Abraham Jefferson nodded solemnly. The Harmony stations were built to reveal universal patterns when the time was right, when people had developed enough to understand, but not so much that they would misuse the knowledge. For 6 remarkable hours, the mechanism continued its silent presentation, revealing principles of energy generation, matter transformation, and cosmic interconnection that challenged the boundaries of current scientific understanding. The research team documented everything, though many aspects would require years of analysis to fully comprehend. As dawn approached and the solstice alignment began to diminish, the energy field gradually receded, the mechanism's components slowing their rotation until they returned to their dormant state. What remained was the profound impact on all who had witnessed the activation, a fundamental shift in understanding that would ripple through scientific disciplines for decades to come. 3 months later, Oakridge Farm had been transformed. The modest research facility established at the northern edge of the property operated in harmony with the continued agricultural activities on the southern fields. The bank's foreclosure threat was now a distant memory, replaced by secure funding through a trust established to preserve both the farm and the knowledge it contained. Jack walked the springtime fields with Emily, watching as the first green shoots emerged from soil now cultivated using principles derived from the mechanism's revelations, farming techniques that worked with natural energy patterns rather than against them. "Your great-grandfather would be proud," Emily said, pausing to examine a particularly vibrant section of new growth. "His protection made all this possible." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of generational continuity. He knew enough to preserve what he didn't fully understand, trusting that someday it would make sense. The discovery beneath Oakridge Farm had rippled beyond scientific circles. 2 additional sites had been identified in other states, their locations matching the star pattern configurations revealed during the solstice activation. Colonel Harrington's division now approached these discoveries with a collaborative model, inspired by their experience at Jack's farm, respect for private ownership balanced with the responsibility of knowledge stewardship. Dr. Thompson had faded from prominence, his connection to the Antiquarian Society exposed through investigation of historical records. Sarah Wilson had surprisingly become an ally, her corporate background proving valuable in establishing sustainable funding models that protected the site from exploitation while ensuring its continued study. What had begun as Jack's desperate attempt to save his family legacy had evolved into something far more significant, the revelation of knowledge that had been carefully preserved across generations, waiting for the right moment and the right steward to emerge. As summer approached, Jack stood in fields more productive than they had been in decades, watching researchers come and go from the underground chambers that had changed everything. The crisis that had nearly cost him his farm had instead revealed its true purpose, not just as agricultural land, but as the protected vessel for wisdom that transcended any single generation. "We don't own this knowledge," he had told Colonel Harrington during the establishment of the long-term preservation agreement. "We're just its current caretakers." This philosophy had become the guiding principle for all activities at Oakridge Farm, a recognition that some discoveries belong not to individuals or institutions, but to humanity itself. Their protection and proper revelation, a responsibility that extended beyond personal or corporate interests. The ancient mechanism beneath the rocky northern slope continued its patient existence, its full secrets not yet entirely revealed. With each significant astronomical alignment, new aspects of its encoded knowledge became accessible. Gradually, expanding human understanding of principles its creators had comprehended more than a century ago. Jack Miller had saved more than his family farm. He had preserved a bridge between past insight and future potential, ensuring that knowledge once at risk of being lost or controlled by narrow interests would instead benefit generations to come. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.